Hi, I'm Lise,
And it's me, Kelly.
and I'm here to share with you some thoughts that Kelly and I have been mulling over and pondering for a while. And we're keeping in mind a couple of the parameters that Doug set up for our conversation during the retreat this year. And I believe the challenge was to think about what we do best, what's core to Severn, and what might Severn need to do to place itself in a good position in the future to remain even more than relevant, but a destination for families as a school. So keeping that in mind, we've prepared a collection of our thoughts, and we thought we would actually work you through our
Well,
process.
yeah. So we ended up using the engineer by design process developed here at Severn School. And in order for something, solutions to be more human centered or user based, you need to begin with asking a question. So that's what we did.
So the first question was, how might we build programs or do school to remain competitive in the independent school market, knowing very well that there's emerging competition from, all the different types of schools that, both charter school and all schools, etc.
And then the second question was, what role, if any, does the GRAW Innovation Center play in the above questions? So in order to do that, we began, in our imagine or our brainstorming phase, and we were just putting out their ideas like things like scholar programs, new departments, badges, changes in graduation requirements, new schedules, changes to our report cards and transcripts, and then
professional development, school year, students, what role do they play in their study? How many choices do they get? Are there more real life experiences included in that?
And then from there, we went on to identifying what are the core concepts or things, groupings that we see out of these, and we came up with 3 of them.
Right. So if we took structure, does that mean that we need a new schedule to do some of this work? Does it mean that we need to translate the work in a visible way to the outside by changing our transcripts or our report cards? Is the way the timeline of the school year is set up the optimum for what we'd like to do?
And then we have things like the program where we see those are more of individual curricular program ideas of scholars programs. Would we create a new department around technology, the badges / micro credentialing type of options, and then again part of the students having a say. And then finally we ended up with people.
Yeah, which we feel is really important. What part of teacher training would need to be modified to reach those goals or built on? And do we tie faculty professional development to their goals?
Mm-hmm. From there, from the imagine phase, we're not quite ready to go to the plan phase because we need to look at what are the requirements and constraints that we have to work with considering all of these questions. And so we begin with...
Well, when we were, or the summer reading for us for this retreat, thank you for being late, Friedman talks about really what the student of the future, or for a young adult to be successful, they will need to be their own startup. And that means a range of knowledge that you have, skills, but really also attributes of resilience, the capacity to propel yourself, to be nimble, to reimagine. So definitely that's one of them.
And then there's, our parents and customers. There are the people that are paying the bills and make the decisions ultimately on whether their child will attend here and what do they want and what's the pace that they can handle change and how much change and what type of change.
And above all, we have to be in line with our school mission. So all the changes that we end up making have to be mission centric.
And again, at what rate that the faculty and staff and students can absorb the changes.
Exactly. So this is actually an interesting chart to look at. And what's interesting with this is Kelly and I both came to this information from different work that we were doing.
Yeah. I attended a conference at the NAS about the mastery transcript, and I thought that it was really interesting to be able to evaluate students in a more like holistic way with these more of these you know, skills that like I think they're talking about in your startup characteristics.
Right. And I came from it from having heard about it, but more recently to having realized that the E.E. Ford Foundation granted about $12 million, a huge amount, for this to be explored further. And I think what's interesting here are the wonderful articulations that they have under each one of these categories. And sometimes what is not written is not seen and is forgotten, because as teachers we're busy, as school people we're busy. So if you take a minute to look just at a couple of these under each category, so you know, and you can excuse the term 21st century if you don't like that, but basically competencies to be that startup kid and to thrive as a happy adult in the future. So they also align with some of the things in our pillars that we have looked at in our strategic plan.
Sure, the idea of you know, globalism and inclusion, technology and innovation. So definitely aligns with those. So feel free to pause this recording at any time if you want us to take a deeper look at some of these.
Right. We'll move along. Yeah, so when Kelly was talking about data, coincidentally, in the last month, Doug, Molly, and I received the results of a survey that Severn participated in, that NAIS co-sponsored with Ames and this region's independent schools. The survey was done by Rockbridge, which is a survey organization. And as you can see here, it was a pretty decent sample, about 3,500 current and prospective families from the 20 independent Greater Baltimore Annapolis schools. In regards to Severn, we have about 270 parents that the information came from. Yep. This is interesting. When we talked about parent requirements, this is coming from data. So some of the top priorities of importance for the parents when they're looking to send their child and to make a choice are curriculum, instruction, and school environment. These are top factors for them. And you can also see that if we compare them to other market schools, they are higher for us here at Severn. The other interesting requirement, which is at really, I think it's the essence of the work that we do, they identified instruction as important and teachers' ability to engage students and to be dedicated and committed. So we thought that these were one of those things. Again, these are requirements of whatever we're going to think about for the future of Severn. Another test.
Yeah, and then, you know, we always have to continue to make sure that we are hitting all of these things, that we are knowing and valuing students. You know, we know the character conduct scholarship, leadership, and the desire to serve. Just always keeping these in the back of our mind when we look at those questions.
Right. And one of the things that we were reflecting on is really, and I can speak from my last 7 years here, is I feel that our community is primed for this conversation right now, is ready for any seeds that we would plant for the future in whatever directions we want to go with the school. And in great part because of some of the work that we've done with professional development. And part of the impetus for this professional development was that adults needed to model the qualities that they wanted to see in their students, and to be perpetual learners, lifelong learners. And Severn's PD does really emphasize self-reflection on your practice. Everything that you're doing has to have real-life application into the classroom, into your work with students. And it talks about faculty should have the attribute of engaging frequently in PD and remaining nimble for change in this world.
So what happened is we've kind of said, okay, what was our question? What was, you know, some ideas around it? And and then we looked at some data, and now we're at the point like, well, gosh, of these questions we had, what do we think is most relevant for this area in order to move forward? And I think what we decided upon was that teacher training and tying faculty professional development to their goals plan was probably at the center. And let's give an example of this is the idea that, you know, if we provide our teachers with quality training on assessments, then this can lead to them then.
They're open to thinking about an exam schedule that might reflect
like their new assessment practices.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then if they are looking at how do we do exams differently, then that could possibly lead to, hey, how do we create a new schedule to reflect our new beliefs about exams and assessments?
And the pedagogies that come with some of those changes.
So again, just to recap, we're thinking that these two questions in the center, the teacher training and faculty professional development and their growth plan is key to go forward.
And it will lead to a cascade of good questions that then will have us emerged in a school that can incorporate these changes. And I think we also went to the teacher piece because it was very obvious in the parent survey, the importance of the quality of teaching, their engagement. And we know that in a school, the doers are the faculty. You know, the ideas might be, started at an administrative level and hopefully also might be generated from the faculty itself, but really the implementers are our faculty.
Yeah, and I was talking to Lisa about the idea that, it's always a best practice to have people who have to implement the change be a part and empower them to be a part of the change.
Yep.
So then we went to our next question, which was, what role, if any, does the Grow Innovation Center play in the previous questions? And we did just a little bit of brainstorming, and we came up with these 4 or 5 just to start off with.
Right. So what can the space mean to faculty and students? And maybe I'll just back up for 2 seconds. And that is for all of us to remember that GIC is 2 years old. And so we started it with some ideas in mind. And definitely faculty and students have had exposure to it. So here we're really focusing on the word mean, in the large sense of the word.
Yeah, and it's those questions that we're at that point in time. Now that we've had a little bit of exposure, it's like, do we think of the Grow Innovation Center as being like a destination for how the athletes have their thing and the theater people and various things? Or could it possibly be like a new way of proceeding? And by that we mean, is the GIC a place that inspires new methods and new ways of teaching and learning? And it's not just a place where those kinds of meetings are housed, but it's kind of the center from which those ideas flow.
Right. And the whole concept, if we went back to Kelly's original, the drawing that showed the thinking that goes on, that was adapted here for Severn, and that is engineering new ideas, asking, imagining, planning, having new iterations, and having sharing. And so there's a physical space for it, but there's also a mindset for it.
And then, should the GIC have a more public purpose in the sense of, are we connecting more to our alumni, to the greater community in which we exist, to create more of those like real life applications?
Real world applications, opportunities, and really that exchange becomes a really interesting place for gaining knowledge, but also for imagining different possibilities, for I could go on about that, but there again, should we have a window looking out, and should we be inviting people in, and should we be hosts to some things that we think would be interesting for us and for the public at large?
And that's kind of where we are at the process right now. And we don't want to say one way or the other which this is, and we hope that this can be part of the conversation that we get to have with you guys when we all meet up again.
Yes. Right. So on July 6th, what we'll do is we will review briefly this, our little screencast here with you. and really begin with the question about the GRA Innovation Center.